at least. For most of the time we're talking about solar, we'll be talking about kilowatt installations. Just want you to acknowledge that there's 1,000 kilowatts in a megawatt, and then there's 1,000 megawatts in a gigawatt. Okay, so I'm going to use those units a couple different ways as I'm talking through this. Just for quick reference, so a kilowatt installation would ultimately power maybe 76 light bulbs for a year. A megawatt installation could maybe power 10 retail stores. A gigawatt installation could maybe power 170,000 homes. So when you think about 1.8 million people in the county and all the property that we have and how much power we need to generate, we're really talking on the order of gigawatts, right? But when we talk about residential home installations, we're talking about kilowatt installations on your roof or side yard, right? Okay, next. Okay, so where are we at today? So we successfully did our first demonstration project at Young at Art. Hopefully you've all visited and seen the solar canopy that's installed, and they've done a lot of educational programming for that. So that was about 50 kilowatts. We are putting forth a 5-year program requesting funds for solar investments, both for emergency energy resilience as well as investments at our county facilities. Probably will lead to on the order of 1 megawatt of installation. I asked FPL for the latest in their how many installations we have across Broward. So they let me know that we have 568 net metering customers in Broward out of 940,000 accounts. Okay, so you can see you're drop in the bucket, but hopefully we'll see that number grow and grow. And that totals about 8.2 megawatts, which is no small amount. And then overall, FPL has said that they are continuing to invest in solar. They have about 335 megawatts of power either installed or in planning to be installed in the near future. And then over the next when I had asked them for this, over the next few years, by 2020, they intend to replace the same percentage of what coal and fuel oil that they're using with solar % of their fuel mix. I'll take questions at the end if that's okay, if you just make a note. Of course.
Yes, everything, the summary and all the slides are shared on the website at the end.
All right, okay.
Yes.
So you know, that is excellent, but that's only 5%. So the reason I kind of shared this is to kind of bring up the conversation of scales, right? So, you know, yes, the utility needs to make these investments, but they are, you know, it's not going to get us to the point of that 100% that a lot of cities are making that commitment to. So we need to really kind of think about what we can do at our regional scale, and then what can individuals do. And you can see there's a long way to go. Oh, next. Oh, I touched it. I'm sorry, Jason. Okay, so as a region, as a county, we have set the goal, and it's listed in our climate action plan, it's listed in our energy strategic plan, it's listed in our renewable energy action plan, that we want to source about 20% of our energy from renewables. And that's about 3 gigawatts. So remember, that's the big one, 1,000 megawatts, right? So we have a very lofty goal for us to get to that point, right? But we can do it, right? We have to. Jason? We need a better signal. Next slide. Stay on this one. Okay, so you know, the first conversation in solar tends to start with rooftops. We know that that is not the end-all be-all answer, but I just wanted to start there because we had recently done some analysis in GIS just to answer some basic questions for ourselves. If we looked at all the rooftops in Broward, we could generate about 9 gigawatts. So I told you to get to our 20% goal, we needed at least 3. So that means we could meet that goal if we really started to use just rooftops. So then I was curious, should we focus on large commercial installations? Should we focus on homeowners? You know, who has the most potential? And so looking at small buildings, so something less than 5,000 square feet, you know, or maybe residential and most small businesses, et cetera, that capacity is about 5 gigawatts. Then looking at medium buildings, so between 5 and 10,000 square feet, that's about 2 gigawatts. And then looking at large buildings in Broward, that's another 2 gigawatts. So, you know, I thought this was interesting because yes, we can meet our goal by focusing on the commercial properties, but it's also good to know that there's a lot of capacity at the residential level. And so promoting those programs in order to encourage people to participate in things like the solar co-op and a lot of the opportunities that you're going to hear about in the first panel makes a lot of sense as well. So if we used all of this rooftop capacity, it would still only offset about 63% of the energy that we're using. So it doesn't get us to 100%. And I think that's important to note. Also, there may be reasons that you don't want to put solar on your roof, because structural reasons, there's a lot that comes up a lot when we first start these planning efforts. So we're also looking at ground mounted, right? So those solar canopies shade your parking lots. That's a great feature. Maybe it's a walkway. All those kinds of things add up to be beneficial as well. So we absolutely are pursuing ground mounted solar. In fact, at the county, that may be our preference in the near future. We also looked at, all right, say you just have to be responsible for what you're responsible for. So we looked at our county facilities. If we just used the rooftops for our county facilities, we could only offset about 1/3 of the power that we are using for our operations. So again, just trying to get you to acknowledge that this is only going to get done or get to that, get to our goals if we work together, because I can only offset, even if I used all my rooftops at the county facilities, I can only offset about 1/3 of my power. So I'm going to have to think bigger than that. Next slide, please. Jason. Apologies. Okay, so I want us to think bigger, right? Because the point of all this is not just because I love the sun, I am a Floridian, I want to see us use this, incredible renewable source of energy. It's that we need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions so that we do not exceed temperatures at a global scale that will increase the amount of sea level rise. We are about to spend lots and lots of money to adapt to sea level rise. We're planning for 2 feet by 2060. How much more do we want to invest in beyond that point? It's not going to stop at 2060, it's going to go beyond that. And that's why it's so important for us to invest in renewables and really concentrate on trying to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So again, from this analysis that I mentioned earlier, this is actually also contained in our greenhouse gas emissions report and inventory. We looked at some reduction strategies to see what effect they would have. So if we assumed that all households install, or if 25% of households install solar panels and solar thermal systems, so heating your water with solar by 2040, we could reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 22% from the residential energy use. If we assume that 100% of households participate, it reduces it by 85%. And so that was aligned with what the goals we're trying to reach by 2040 is, right? We want to offset 85% of our emissions by 2040, 2050, right? So that helps us get towards our goal. Then looking at commercial benchmarking, so tracking the energy that you use and installing and constructing retrofits so that you can actually reduce the amount of energy that you're using in commercial buildings. If we did that across 1 million square feet of buildings, it could reduce greenhouse gases by 8% from commercial electricity. If we did it on all commercial buildings, it helps us reduce by 61%. And the point is here that whether or not the federal government puts in place policies that require certain reduction strategies, there's going to be a huge piece that the local component will need to come up with, right? So there's going to be a gap that we need to fill. And so what we were trying to do was look at how much could we actually address. It's really important for the federal component to be in line, but we also need to make sure that we can do the most that we can. And then looking at both, moderate goals, and that's why we looked at maybe the 25% or a certain amount of square feet. But then what if we went all the way and seeing what the possibilities are? Because it's very difficult when you're setting these arbitrary goals of 10%, 20%, et cetera. We need to actually see what's possible and what will work. So I think the takeaway from here is we can effectively reduce a significant amount of the 25 million tons of greenhouse gases that we're producing every year as a county by using renewables and making sure that we're tracking and reducing our energy use. Next slide. So we also, just as an example, went through and did kind of what would it take to get to the 100% renewable energy, right? So we've picked an example city. I won't let you know what it is, but if you wanted to see the data, we can go through it together. And just said what would be feasible, right? So the first step, we said, all right, go ahead and convert to electric vehicles because half of our emissions are coming from transportation. And then make sure that those electric vehicle charging stations are solar powered, right? So if we transition 3% of those electric vehicles per year, that would be our first step. Then we try to convert the community to solar, assuming that we can install about 2,500, on average 5 kilowatt solar PV systems annually, both at the residential, commercial, and commercial level. And then make sure that we're installing those solar EV stations. And then the third step would be, as you're going through this process, trying to purchase renewable energy credits until you get to the point where you're fully 100% renewable. So that, I think we were aiming for, by 2050, this community could be 100% renewable. And so what the point of this was that we had defined that path. It wasn't unreasonable to ask for, 3% investments, et cetera, and 2,500 installation systems. And so it was kind of a unique, helpful exercise. And so I just want to let you know that we're thinking along this path. And we look forward to working with you for any of you that have committed to the 100% renewable energy goal. Next slide, please. So my last slide is just acknowledging that we really would like to see everyone in this room help us start to, whether it's at your city permitting level or depending on what other organization you represent, we need to standardize our tracking ends of solar. It's very difficult at this moment to get data from our utility as far as location, the number, the wattage, et cetera. And so we can build that into our own permitting process and be able to track that at a more refined level. We do want to support the voluntary solar program. FPL has been very explicit that they will make more investments in our community if more people are participating and there's more funds to spend on those demonstration projects and in the parks and at schools, et cetera, where they've been putting the solar canopies. We also need to talk about different financing mechanisms so that everyone at different scales is able to make these investments. That will come up in your first panel today. We, as part of the capital budget program request that I had mentioned at the beginning, will be working with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory to have them kind of help us with some technical assistance to start to plan these projects, start to talk about conversations like microgrids, which you're going to hear about in your third panel, and then also how do we incentivize the progression of this whole campaign, right? And overall, really just trying to make sure that we're making the investments to get us to that 20% renewable energy goal, which we know is really critical to make us on our way to reduce greenhouse gases and ensure that we're not having to plan for more sea level rise than we want to. Okay, thank you.